Headlines for today's newscast: no change in the Seoul-Washington alliance even after the senseless attack on U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert. The only change is the level of media attention on the man behind the attack. President Park Geun-hye is still on her Middle East diplomacy tour. She promotes Korea's halal food development deal with the UAE, so-called software cooperation, and the nuclear-related service sector. Korea's minimum wage is set to go up, so lawmakers put their heads together to discuss the specifics, including how much and how fast. Stay with us for these stories and more. Welcome to Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. Well, prosecutors are seeking an arrest warrant for the man who attacked U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert.
And the assailant will likely have to face several charges, including attempted murder. Officials are also looking into whether the assault is related to his past pro-North Korea activities.
And Connie Kim starts us off.
Prosecutors are seeking an arrest warrant to charge a man who carried out a bloody knife attack on U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert with attempted murder, business obstruction, and violence against the foreign envoy. The prosecution said the attack was intentional, considering that the 55-year-old was equipped with the 10-inch knife he used in the incident. He had reportedly been planning the attack for 10 days. A special investigative team will look into the motives behind the assault and whether the attacker was working with an accomplice. It's focusing on Kim's pro-North Korea activities and could charge him with violating the national security law that bars sympathizing with North Korea if enough evidence is found. Kim traveled to North Korea 7 times from 1999 to 2007. He also attempted to set up a memorial in Seoul to the late North Korean leader Kim Jong-il upon his death in 2011. Another possible motive for the attack: as he was being arrested, Kim voiced his opposition to ongoing military exercises between Korea and the U.S. and demanded they come to a halt. The attack on the U.S. ambassador was the first of its kind in Korea. High-level officials from the government, ruling party, and the presidential office of Cheongwade have agreed to share information with Washington in line with their bilateral ties. Lippert is at a local hospital recovering from surgery he received after the attack to repair his face and hand injuries, and doctors say he can be discharged as early as next week. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And since the story of Ambassador Lippert broke yesterday, global media outlets have been focusing on the motive behind the bloody slashing.
And on how the attacker was protesting the ongoing military drills between the U.S. and South Korea. The Washington Post led with North Korea's callous reaction to the incident and brought up the possibility of a return to heightened tensions on the Korean peninsula.
CNN International also reported on how Pyongyang applauded the knife attack. Other news media pointed out the undercurrent of anti-American sentiment in certain parts of South Korean society.
Staying on that disgraceful incident that happened yesterday, U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert was, of course, on the receiving end of that incident. It shook the nation and also sparked concerns about whether it will affect Seoul's relations with Washington.
Yes, but the general view by analysts is that the U.S.-Korea alliance will remain intact. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
South Korea and the United States have enjoyed an alliance that gets stronger by the day. And then this happened, a brutal knife attack on the U.S. ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert by a South Korean man at an event in central Seoul. But experts are not worried about the incident affecting the alliance.
But if you think about it, the national interests do not change.
That national interest stretches from trade, tourism to military cooperation, with a focus on countering North Korean threats. The suspect in Thursday's attack shouted his opposition to the joint South Korea-U.S. military drills. But the South Korea-U.S. Combined Forces Command stands firm by its plan to conduct the drills, scheduled to continue through late April. North Korea's hasty response to the attack, calling it a deserved punishment, and the knife of justice for the joint exercises, may also bolster Seoul and Washington's commitment in dealing with Pyongyang's human rights abuses and nuclear program.
This will push them even further to support more punitive actions and aggressive actions.
Most analysts say the pillars of the alliance are too strong to be shaken by an unpredictable lone wolf attack by a crazed individual. But some do point out that while the relationship at the government level will remain intact, the incident could take a toll on U.S. public sentiment about security in South Korea. Hwang, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye, who's traveling in the Middle East, has named an independent inspector to keep an eye out for illicit actions by the president's family members and high-ranking government officials. Lee Seok-soo, a former prosecutor, was selected from a pool of 3 candidates recommended by the parliament. Announcing the nomination, the presidential office cited Lee's investigative expertise from his 22-year career. During her election campaign, President Park had promised an independent inspection of the president's family and high-level officials to eradicate corruption in the administration. The nominee will need to gain parliamentary approval to win appointment. And during the tour, Korea and the UAE agreed to upgrade the level of their economic cooperation, signing deals in areas considered softer compared to plant and railway construction. President Park vowed to give full support to the collaborative efforts. Our presidential office correspondent Ji-hye follows this report from Abu Dhabi.
Highlighting the great potential in Korea's latest halal food development deal with the UAE, President Park Geun-hye told the two countries' business leaders that it's time for Seoul and Abu Dhabi to focus on the so-called software cooperation. By that, she meant going beyond the hardware infrastructure ventures. Referring to recent joint hospital management and construction projects between the two sides, the president expressed hope that the collaboration will expand into the pharmaceutical industry and thereby spur corporate investments. In terms of energy, President Park directed attention towards the nuclear-related service sector, especially since the Seoul-Abu Dhabi Strategic Partnership was formed after they agreed to cooperate in nuclear energy in 2009. And finally, the Korean leader stressed that the two sides should broaden their perspective and, based on their mutual trust, look towards entering a third market together. She then promised to support commercialization of collaborative ideas and to cut red tape to encourage investment. In a display of her commitment to the bilateral partnership, President Park met with a group of youth ambassadors from the UAE who had spent a month visiting Korea as part of Abu Dhabi's Korea Expert Fostering Program. She also visited the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque, named after the UAE's founding father and most respected leader.
On her final day in Abu Dhabi, President Park plans to meet Koreans residing here to praise their achievements and to ask that they continue doing their roles in bridging the two sides. She'll then travel to Qatar, the final stop in a regional tour. Ji-hye, Arirang News, Abu Dhabi.
We maintain our focus on the Middle Eastern regions, or Middle Eastern region-related stories, rather. Korea will begin drilling for oil in the United Arab Emirates in collaboration with a consortium that includes GS Energy. The Korea National Oil Corporation said Friday it will aim to extract up to 5,000 barrels of crude oil per day starting in the year 2017, eventually expanding that to 40,000 by the year 2019. The state-run oil company formed the consortium with GS Energy 3 years ago to develop 3 oil fields in partnership with the UAE's state-owned Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. They have successfully extracted 18,000 barrels of crude from the Haliba field on the Omani border last year.
A hike in the minimum wage has been a hot topic of discussion since Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan highlighted the need for one earlier this week. But it has also fueled concerns that too big of a jump could end up putting small and mid-sized firms out of business. Kwon So-ah reports.
5,200 Korean won, or a little more than $5 an hour, is the current minimum wage in Korea. The amount has risen steadily over the years, but many say it should be climbing faster. With around 3 months remaining for the government to decide on a minimum wage hike ahead of a yearly wage review, it's become a hot potato in the political arena. It was on the table at 2 meetings on Friday, one between senior officials from the presidential office, the government, and the ruling Saenuri Party, and another held by the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy. The parties at both meetings seemed to see eye to eye on remarks by Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan earlier this week when he talked about the possibility of deflation if things stay the way they are.
Unless we raise the minimum wage, we have no chance of reviving the economy. It has come to the point that we plan to provide tax deductions for companies that raise salaries higher than their past 3-year averages.
Adding to this, a report out Friday says raising the minimum wage will lead to an increase in the labor share or the ratio of wages to GDP and eventually lead to an increase in employment. But there are also opposing voices from employers and business associations, as there are concerns that a hike to $6 or $7 an hour could cause big problems for the nation's small firms. In line with this, the Korea Employers Federation has recommended that companies refrain from raising hourly pay by more than 1.6%. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
As Samsung Group prepares to pass leadership on to heir apparent Lee Jae-yong after Chairman Park Geun-hye was hospitalized last year, the age spectrum of the group is becoming younger. Our Na Young-kyung has this story.
The average age of Samsung Group's employees is dropping. The group says 80% of its workers are in their 20s and 30s, while more than half of them were born in 1980 or later. Korea's top conglomerate expects the average age to drop even further as new recruits will start working by the end of the month. Looking at one of the group's affiliates, it's even easier to see how hard the conglomerate is trying to give itself new life. The average age of the group's biotech arm, Samsung Bioepis, is a little over 30, which is even lower than that of NC Soft, a high-profile Korean game company that began as a promising startup. Samsung Group's efforts to transform itself into a company that's fresh and innovative comes after Samsung Electronics chairman Park Geun-hye was hospitalized following a heart attack last May. Pundits say his son Jae-yong, poised to inherit leadership of the group, is at the center of the change. And it's not just the average age of employees that the Crown Prince is trying to give a twist. The group's communication methods are also changing to cater to the younger generation through the use of online and mobile content. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
Techie wear is all the rage, and the wearable market's global sales volume is expected to surpass 51 million units this year, nearly 3 times that of last year. Germany-based GfK market researcher forecasts the growth to be led by sales of smartwatches that are expected to expand by 6.5 times this year compared to a year ago. The research firm says the market will expand even further as major global electronic companies like Apple and LG Electronics jump into that race. And wrapping up our 3-part series on China's slowing economy and its impact on Korea. Today we're going to take a look at how some Korean exporters are actually managing to perform better than ever in the Chinese market despite the slowdown. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Korea's #1 rice cooker manufacturer, Kuko Electronics, says its leading foreign customers are Chinese. The company's overall sales in China has grown 60% annually since 2013. Such demand even spurred Kuko to go public on Korea's main bourse last year.
Our premium strategy on Chinese consumers has worked out well. Our cooker caters to Chinese food and cooking culture, which has helped to bolster sales.
Kuku Electronics isn't alone. Korean-made consumer goods ranging from home appliances to beauty and fashion items are seeking to expand its presence in the Chinese market, a market that's rapidly growing in tandem with consumer demand. Despite growing success in the Chinese market, the total demand for consumer goods stands at a mere 4%, but for intermediate goods, it's well over 68%. It's a significant gap, but experts are hopeful that the Korean wave and improved income and living standards in China will help stoke local spending.
The Chinese government has been fostering consumption driven by economic development. This means its slowing growth rate won't significantly hurt Korean exporters.
Experts say Korean companies should invest more in marketing and branding their goods so they can keep up with the competition coming out of countries like Japan and France. And with the Korea-China Free Trade Agreement set to take effect next year, Korean exporters will have even more opportunities to make their mark, just like Kuku Electronics. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Shifting gears to a different realm now, the European Central Bank will launch its long-awaited €1 trillion stimulus program on Monday. From Cyprus on Thursday, ECB President Mario Draghi expressed confidence in an improving European economy as the central bank upgraded its GDP growth projection by half a percentage point to 1.5% this year. Draghi announced the quantitative easing program will purchase €60 billion per month through September of next year, or until inflation reaches closer to its target of 2%. In response, European and U.S. bonds ended up. The euro fell to an 11.5-year low against the greenback before settling slightly higher, above $1.10.
A senior U.S. advisor says the U.S. Congress should encourage Japan to make efforts to heal ties with its neighbors that have worsened due to Tokyo's denials of its wartime history. President and CEO of the Mansfield Foundation, Park Geun-hye, says that if the issues are not addressed, wounds from the past could threaten important future steps for the U.S.-Japan alliance, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal and the finalization of new alliance defense guidelines. Geun-hye, who described Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women as forced recruitment, pointed out that Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been trying to minimize Tokyo's culpability. It's been confirmed that a missing Korean-Canadian pastor is being held captive in North Korea. Reverend Im Hyun-soo's family says North Korea relayed the information to the Canadian government. A spokesperson for the family told CNN to ask Canadians and the international community to pray for his release and safe return home. The reason for Im's detainment remains unclear. The 60-year-old entered North Korea via China at the end of January on a humanitarian mission and has been missing ever since. Im has been actively involved in aid missions to the north since mid-1990s, helping with various food and education programs.
It's snowmageddon all over again in the U.S. Parts of that country are being pounded by a monster snowstorm, closing schools and forcing thousands of flights to be canceled on the East Coast. And it's against this backdrop that a routine domestic flight turned into a frightening nightmare, although everyone survived the ordeal. Here's our Park Ji-won.
Delta Flight 1068 from Atlanta to New York's LaGuardia Airport skidded and veered off the runway as the plane was trying to land amid a snowstorm at about 11 a.m. Thursday local time. The plane went up an embankment and plowed through a fence, the only thing keeping from hitting the icy waters of Flushing Bay.
The aircraft was carrying 127 passengers and 5 crew members. Happily, there are only minor injuries that have been reported.
Everyone on board the domestic flight was safely evacuated, and at least 2 of the 24 people injured were taken to a local hospital.
It wasn't really that bad, but it was pretty scary, and I'm just thankful that we didn't go into the water.
The airport was shut down temporarily following the accident. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board has begun investigating the cause of the accident. This accident happened amid a fierce snowstorm that affected New England through northeastern Texas. The monster snowstorm paralyzed the region, affecting some 94 million people, with more than 4,500 flights canceled on Thursday. Schools were closed, as were government offices and transportation services in some states. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Good news for Spanish viewers who have been thirsty for Arirang TV programs. The station you're watching has signed a contents and production exchange deal with Spain's public network, RTVE. Under the agreement, the two stations will exchange programs and news in case of a major breaking event or current affairs. The two-way content will be provided free of charge. One of the first projects is a jointly produced documentary on smart ICT convergence with Arirang filming in Spain and RTVE in Korea. That documentary will be aired on both channels later this year. RTVE is Spain's largest broadcasting operator with a dozen national TV and radio channels and one international TV channel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Today is Gyeongchip here in Korea, which is when all things awake from their winter sleep. Now, it also means spring is near, and temperatures made it up to the seasonal averages today, even going up into the teens in some places. However, you'll still want to be prepared for the huge temperature gaps between the mornings and nights. Now, it's been a sunny day today, and the sky is still looking clear, except on Jeju Island, where 5 millimeters of rain is expected tonight. And meanwhile, be on the lookout for the dry weather advisory, because more and more regions are expected to get very dry in the upcoming days. So be careful with the fires. Now, the weekend weather is expected to be clear and mild as well, with the higher temperature readings, but enjoy it while you can, because rain is expected to fall in some places on Monday through Tuesday, which will also bring down some temperatures. Now let's take a look at the readings for tomorrow. So we'll start off the Saturday morning at -2 and gets up high to 12 degrees. Meanwhile, Daegu and Busan will top at 14 and 13 degrees respectively. Moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 11, Dokdo hits down to 7, while Namkung-gang dips low to 1 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Well, the end of winter or the cold weather is near. How do you feel about that, Ji-hye? Do you miss winter?
Well, I don't miss winter. I miss summer, so I'm waiting for summer and spring.
Oh, you're that kind of a person. Well, I'm going to miss winter because I'm going to miss having the excuse of tucking everything in under thick coats and not having to work out. That's just my take. Well, we've come to the end of our newscast. Here's wishing you a safe drive home or a great start to your day. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang. Have a great weekend. Do join us for more same time next week. Goodbye.